The story has not yet ended. Don't lose your faith, I will repeat that. The story has not yet ended. Don't lose your faith, you know. There are many things that are happening around the world. Some of them don't make sense. In fact, most of them don't make sense. And people are questioning, There are more questions than answers. There are many questions and there are few answers. And things don't make sense. And people have many questions, And because of that, some end up losing their faith, because the questions become overwhelming and many. And they say, why should I believe anymore? Everything doesn't make sense. So some of these questions, we are going to answer them today. But remember this, the story has not ended. Don't lose your faith. So some of the common questions I hear, if God is good, why does he get angry? Why does he have wrath? Question number one. Question number two, if God is perfect, why did he create an imperfect world? Why does he allow all this, unfairness to go on? Number three, why is it that what Adam and Eve did affects everyone, whether you believe it or not? But what Jesus did does not affect everyone. Because remember, if you read the Bible, I'll put the verse up there. The first Adam brought death. Then the second Adam, who is Jesus, brought life. But why is it that what the other Adam did is affecting everyone, whether you believe it or not? But what the second Adam did is not yet affecting everyone. So those are the three questions we are going to answer in this session, okay? Question number one. If God is good, why does he get angry? And the answer to that is simple, because the world is unfair, because of the unfairness of the world, because there are things that happen in this world that even us, we get angry about them, and I believe all of you have experienced this, you guys have all experienced this. There are things that happen and we also get angry and we're like, no, that is unfair, that is unjust, You see it around the world, the innocent suffering, the people who are not supposed to suffering, And sometimes you see the guilty people walking free, you see the oppressors walking free, and it all annoys, it's all depressing. So if us who are sinners, we also look at these things and we say, this is unfair. What about the God who is perfect, What if even us who are not perfect, we also get angry at some of these things and we say, no, that was not fair. What about a God who is perfect? I think even gets annoyed more. In fact, the reason why God gets angry is because the very reason is because he's good, The same reason why God gets angry, why God has wrath, is because of his goodness, his good nature, And I think the people who like blaming God, for being angry and this, I believe these are people who don't believe in God, but they don't believe in God because they are angry at God, It's not because they don't think God exists. I believe most of these people know God exists, but they are just angry at God because, just imagine, most of them go through their lives ignoring God. But when something happens, like a natural disaster, they are the first to ask, where was God? Where was God to save, They go through their lives ignoring God. Then something happens and they're like, where was God? So for me, I believe these people, they are just angry at God, They know he exists, but they're just angry at him, So what I can say is, all those who are angry at God and those who think God is, this old man with a white beard who is just, a tyrant in the sky with an old beard, because God made it in such a way that we don't see him. So when we don't see him, people can draw their own pictures of God, and that's what they are angry at, actually. But we have a representation of God which was real, that was brought to us through Jesus Christ, that we should not reject, because Jesus was real, he walked the earth. And all those who are, who bring those debates about God and they are angry at God, when you show them Jesus, they keep quiet. And that's why when these people are blaming God and calling him an angry God, they avoid talking about Jesus. Why? Because they know Jesus is perfect. Jesus was perfect, very perfect. And through Jesus, we see the mercy of God played out to the fullest. Jesus Christ is the biggest epitome of God's love and God's mercy. Is the biggest example of God's love and God's mercy. That's why they have nothing to talk about him, That's why those who are angry at God, just show them Jesus, When he came, did he judge anyone? No. He brought people to the truth. He told them, come to the truth and let the truth set you free. He defended criminals because he wanted to show them the better way, the truth, and he showed them, turn to the truth, come to God. God that is not interested in judging anyone and condemning anyone. He's interested in saving anyone. For God did not send his son into the world to judge it, but to set it free. So through Jesus, we see the other side of God, the merciful side of God, the loving side of God. In fact, his mercy and his love was so great that he gave up his life for us. I think. So this is the God we are dealing with. His wrath is so great, but his mercy is also abundant. So that is it. That's the first question. God gets angry because he's good. But he's also showing us his mercy through Christ, and is inviting us to enter through the mercy in Jesus Christ. That's why this era is called the era of God's grace. In the era of God's grace, we are called to enter into the mercies of God. So we are living in the era of grace. That's number one. Number two, if God is so perfect, why does he create an imperfect world? Again, the same thing I told you. That's just being angry at God, like I said. And just to remind you, God actually created a perfect world. It was the Garden of Eden, so perfect. Everything was perfect. And even in heaven, he created angels that were beautiful and perfect, including Lucifer. Lucifer was a beautiful and perfect angel. But what happened? Evil entered the angel and corrupted the angel, and the angel rebelled together with the other angels, okay? So the rebellion started in heaven, then it came to earth also through the snake, corrupting Adam and Eve, So now the question now shifts to, why does God allow that to happen? Why does God allow a beautiful world to be corrupted? Because one thing we know for sure, God would have stopped the corruption, he would have stopped it. But why did he allow it to go through? Why didn't he panic to stop everything? And it goes back to what I want to share with you. The patience of God is the wisdom of God. Always remember that the patience of God is the wisdom of God. The wisdom of God is found in his patience. So God allows everything to happen because of his patience. And through his patience, there is wisdom. And we shall all understand this at the end. Because from my belief, if God watched all these things happening and he tried to panic and save the world very fast, I believe it would have happened again. I believe it would have fallen again. So I believe God was patient. He was patient, He took on patience and allowed everything to play out until the end, and then to start his deliverance plan, his plan of delivering. Because it is said, when the devil was tempting the angels in heaven, God actually sat back. God knew what was happening, but he sat back and he left the devil to tempt each and every angel in heaven, up to the last angel. All of them were tempted up to the last one. And God waited for all of them to either say yes or no, yes or no, up to the last one, yes or no. And all those who said yes were driven out, I think that those who said yes to the temptation of the devil that had been corrupted by evil. So again, it shows you the patience of God, because in the patience of God we find the wisdom of God, and there is a reason why God sometimes sits back and allows things to play out until the end, so that everything can be exposed, everything can be revealed. I think. So that's why God is being patient with this world, which is not perfect, because God is allowing everything to play out. And at the end of the time, I'm telling you, all answers will be revealed to us, Because that's why one of the reasons why those who don't believe in God, they say, no. Why does God keep some knowledge to himself? Why doesn't he freely reveal all this knowledge to everyone, But I want to assure you, like, God is a mysterious God, not a mischievous God. It's not like he has a plan of mischief, It shows you that all this is the patience of God. And I believe at the right time, all the answers will be revealed to us. We shall be given all the answers. We say, oh, that's how it was, So again, that is it. That's why God is allowing this imperfect world to continue operating through perfectness. Why? Because a new world, a new earth and a new heaven will be created, to replace this. And I believe part of this is God is allowing all this to play out until the end, so that there will be no more falling away. There will be no more corruption in the new world and in the new earth and the new heaven. And I believe also this is part of training for us, because we are co-heirs with Christ. We are going to inherit the new heaven and the new earth, and we reign together with Christ. So if you have your children and you want them to inherit, your property, what do? You train them. You let them go through training so that when they finally inherit your property, they know what to do. They will be better administrators who will keep evil at bay and, rejoice in goodness, who will trust you even better because you've trained them to trust you in a world which is not imperfect. How more can they trust you in the world which will be perfect, So I think some of it now makes sense, So by the power of the Holy Spirit, by the grace of God, some of these things are revealed to us, but some of them, God chooses to keep them to himself, and they will be revealed at the end of time. The last question: why is it that what Adam and Eve did affects everyone, whether you believe it or not, and what Christ did does not affect everyone? The second Adam, remember, like what we said. And the answer is simple. What Adam and Eve did, a final judgment was passed on that. God passed a final judgment on that. And once the final judgment was passed, it was going to affect every creature, whether they believe it or not. Now, what Jesus did, on the other hand, a final judgment has not yet been passed on what Jesus did. The full work of salvation was done. It was completed, But now Jesus is seated at the right hand of the Father, interceding for us, Now the final judgment will be passed when Jesus comes back the second time. And from there, when the final judgment is passed on what Jesus did, it will affect everyone, whether you believed it or not. I see. So I believe one of the reasons why God is also trying to show us in his mysterious ways is showing us if what Adam and Eve did is affecting all of them to this point, how more will what Christ did will affect you through eternity. It will affect all of us, whether you believe it or not, throughout the whole eternity, So that's why God allows this era to be there, the era of grace, because in the era of God's grace and mercy, the era of God's invitation, actually, God is inviting all of us to come into what Jesus did, to come into what Jesus did and inherit the kingdom, to come into what Jesus did and get salvation, So that is it. That's why we should always call upon people to come into what Jesus did, We should always encourage people to come into what Jesus did. Why? Because a final judgment is going to be passed on what Jesus did, And it will affect everyone. Right now, it is not affecting everyone. It is only affecting those who believe. Why? Because God is still giving time, And then a final judgment will be passed on that, And just to end with this, there's one thing that sometimes hurts, but again at the same time, because this is what happens, the spiritual war is being fought in our backyard on earth here. Because we are caught up in this war. Whether you believe it or not, there is a conflict going on between darkness and light. There is a conflict going on between evil and good, okay? There is a war going on in the spiritual world between evil and good. And this war, we are also caught up in this war. But now what is most amazing is that in heaven, the war is no longer there. The rebellious angels were driven out, The war is no longer there in heaven. Now in hell also, there is no war. Where the demons are, where the evil spirits are, there is no war. Why? Because now they are agreeing on their evil plan. They know that, okay, we were driven out. Now let us do our evil plan. Are you seeing? Even in heaven, there is no more war. Now the war comes to us on earth. But now, to make matters worse, we are the most ignorant spiritually. We are the most, because we don't understand everything that's going on, Because the angels know the spiritual codes. They know most of these things. Even the demons know most of these things. But for us, we are very ignorant, Yet the war is being fought where we are. That explains in the Bible. Why do you think when Jesus came on earth, the demons recognized him very fast? Like the demons were recognizing him very fast. The angels recognized him very fast. But human beings were like, no, this cannot be the Son of God, This is Mary's son. The other, he stays. We saw him growing up in Joseph's house. Joseph the carpenter. How can he be the Messiah? So that's how ignorant we are. Because the things that are happening are beyond our understanding. Yet they are affecting us. The war is being fought where we are. So we are caught up in this spiritual war. Yet we are very ignorant. We don't know everything that's going on. That's why we are told to believe and have faith. I see. So how do you make ignorant people powerful? How do you make ignorant people powerful when a war that is beyond their minds is going on around them? You tell them to believe and have faith in the winning side, because you all know the side of God is the winning side. Jesus has already won. So you tell them to believe in the winning side. You tell them in advance what is going to happen, and you tell them to keep their faith no matter what in the winning side. That's how you make them powerful. So you see, our power is faith. Once you lose your faith, you lose your power. And you should tell this to everyone out there, if you wish them well. Like, if you lose your faith, you lose your power. Our power is in faith. That's why even when you're told to put on the armor of God, we are told to put on the armor of God and stand and resist. We are not told to fight. We are told to stand and resist, so that the devil can flee, We are told to stand and resist, because our power is in faith. Once you lose your faith, you lose your power, Once you lose hope, once you lose love and faith, you lose power. So our faith, that's where power is. So don't lose faith. I know there are many things that are happening that may not make sense, but like I told you at the beginning of the video, I tell you again at the end, the story has not yet ended. When the story ends, everything will make sense. But the story has not yet ended. Don't lose your faith midway in the story. We are in the middle of the story. We are caught up in things we don't understand, but we are told to have faith and believe in God. Even Jesus said, don't be scared. Believe in me and believe in the Father also, and the Spirit of truth will be with you. Okay? So don't lose faith. Our power is in having faith. Yes, there are many things that are happening beyond our understanding, many things that are scary, blah blah blah. You'll be hearing things. It doesn't matter. If you keep your faith, if you don't lose your faith, you have power. If you lose your faith, you abandon your power. Yes, thank you for keeping up to this long, and I hope you've learned something. God bless you. Peace. See you in the next one. Thank you.